Alistair Overeem versus Alexander Volkov. And we got this heavyweight bout headlining this card. And it's a pretty pivotal one, too, considering the little bit of a streak that we have for both guys. Obviously, Volkov is coming off to a loss to Curtis Blades, which he quickly followed up with the dismantling of Walt Harris way back at UFC 254. And he's looking to build upon that momentum. He's number 6. We got Alistair Overeem at number 5. In terms of odds, we got Volkov coming in as a pretty hefty favorite at minus 180, and we got the return on Overeem around plus 160. Now let's start off with the Volkov, like I was. Coming over from Bellator, he had a little bit of a stint over there in Russia too, but he came over to the UFC scene, and he dropped a couple of his first fights. And then recently, he's been exchanging wins and losses, particularly his last 4 fights. He was 11 seconds away from beating Derek Lewis back at UFC 229, gets knocked out there. Then he goes on to beat a short notice Greg Hardy. That was actually the first time he was scheduled to fight Alistair Overeem, and that was back in November of 2019, I believe it was. So he goes out there, outpoints Greg Hardy, who I believe broke his hand in that fight too. Comes back, loses to Curtis Blades. Very tough stylistic matchup for him. And then he comes back and beats Walt Harris in a very impressive fashion. And I think that has a lot to do with why he's as big of a favorite as he is here against Overeem. We know his game. He's a tall dude, 6'7", 81-inch reach, uses his kicks and his length very well with his jab, with his striking. Is primarily a striking fighter. But one thing that we noticed in his last fight is he put on a little bit of weight, and a lot of people saw that as possibly a bad thing, but it worked out pretty well for him there. So he weighed in against Curtis Blades at 247. That was June of 2020. He comes back 4 months later against Walt Harris, and he weighs in at 265. So he puts on a solid 18 pounds there. Who knows if he was even more than 265, since that is the heavyweight limit. But, still an impressive performance. A lot of people thought it would slow him down. If anything, it would slow him down in a fight like this, where we're going 25 minutes. So I'm interested to see if we're actually going to see Volkov once again come in at that heavyweight limit, and what he looks like on the scales, and how it would transfer to him possibly surviving a full 25 minutes with Alistair Overeem. It was a body kick that eventually put Walt Harris down, and he managed to finish him just about a minute and a half into that second round. And again, he looked great, and I think a lot of people are kind of overblowing that, which is why he's a minus 180 favorite here. Let's talk about Alistair Overeem now, who's on a 2-fight winning streak. He could have been on a 5-fight winning streak as of right now. He gave up that last second knockout to Jairzinho Rozenstruik. I have a lot of thoughts about that regarding, Rozenstruik kind of just calling it himself, which kind of forced the referee to step in himself. You possibly, like we've seen instances in the past where referees and stuff have let fighters kind of try to battle back from that, but they just did not have it there. And that was rough for Overeem, as he was like 4 seconds away from pretty much locking up another victory right there. So he falls to Jairzinho Rozenstruik, goes out there and absolutely batters Walt Harris in their fight. Not before getting dropped and rocked himself too. He does show good perseverance, pushes through that, covers up long enough, and then pushes away so that the referee wouldn't stop it. And then eventually we see him, take down Walt Harris and start to grind on him and really start to outwork him, eventually finishing him via second round ground and pound. And then after that, he goes out there and beats a 29-year-old Augusto Sakai. And I like to say 29-year-old because a lot of people put a lot of flack on these guys that have reached 40 years old and think they automatically lose fights once they reach 40. He turned 40, I believe, a day or two after he beat Walt Harris, and then 3 months later or 4 months later, he goes out there and just dummies Augusto Sakai. Those first 2 rounds, a little bit close. You could definitely score them from Augusto, but it seems once that third round hit, it started to go downhill for Sakai, and that's where we saw Overeem, absolutely bludgeoning him in that 4th round. Almost came close to finishing him there, and then in that 5th round, it was just... It took 25 seconds or 26 seconds for him to take him down and just absolutely dribble his head off the canvas with some beautiful elbows and get the finish there. So his cardio checks out. He can definitely go 5 rounds. He can definitely put on a pace for 5 rounds. And, that's very reassuring if you're looking to back Overeem here at plus money. Another statistic that I kind of threw out there on Twitter the other day was... in Overeem's 13 fights from when he entered the UFC against Brock Lesnar all the way up until the time he fought Francis Ngannou, which was the fight before Curtis Blades, he only landed 3 takedowns, which is crazy to me to think that now he's going out there in his next 5 fights after Curtis Blades and landing 7 takedowns. And that's just an attribution to him changing camps after that Curtis Blades loss. Ends up going to train with Curtis and picks up a thing or two over there. And we've seen him pull off some pretty nifty takedowns since joining that team. So we're seeing an evolution in Alistair Overeem's game, even in his late 30s and 40s now. So that's very reassuring for a fighter that is as skilled as Overeem is, and we've seen him kind of like come over to the US and try a couple different training camps out, but it really doesn't work out. Apparently there's a lot of like ego issues or something there. But he goes over to Colorado and he looks amazing. Apparently he's a great training partner now, especially for a guy like Curtis Blades who's on his way to the top. Another statistic that was great too, in his last 3 fights, he's accrued almost 18 minutes of control time, which is a further proof of Overeem knowing that, okay, I just can't go out there and try to knock these guys out anymore. I need to go out there, grind them out, slowly work my game, and then the finish will eventually come if that's what is open to me. Just as it was against Walt, just as it was against Augusto. And the finish didn't come against Jairzinho, even though it went a full 5 rounds, but he still showed off a good fight IQ there in terms of just controlling and nullifying the power of Jairzinho up until pretty much the last couple of seconds of that fight. Now here against Volkov, I think he's going to have success in kind of pushing Volkov up against the cage and really making it a dirty, grinding fight, making it an Alistair Overeem 3.0 type of fight where he's just clinching, working his knees as he always has throughout his career. One of the most devastating knees, in the clinch definitely comes from Alistair Overeem. And now, mixing in takedowns and having good top pressure and the way that he finished Sergey Pavlovich was very impressive as well too. Not really in the full guard, but just standing over and landing absolute bombs. And he's really starting to figure out how to get his striking going on the ground too, to really devastate these guys and really hurt them too. So his chin obviously been an issue later in his career. Gets knocked out by Jairzinho Rozenstruik, but again, not the cleanest knockout. Gets dropped for sure. But Jairzinho, I put him up there with like the Francis Ngannou's in terms of having knockout power. I think Jairzinho might have the second or third hardest punch in the UFC behind Francis Ngannou and maybe Derek Lewis as well too, who obviously holds the knockout record in the UFC for heavyweights. His other time he got finished was by Curtis Blades. That was elbows in the guard. Absolutely beautiful work from him there. And then, ground and pounded by Stipe back in 2016. So what I'm basically trying to get at is, I don't think that Overeem's chin is much of an issue nowadays compared to what it used to be like a couple years ago. Alexander Volkov, on the other hand, he's not really like a one-punch knockout kind of guy. Like even with Walt Harris, he puts him out there, puts him away with the body kick. You know what I mean? And before that, beats Fabricio Verdum pretty much from exhaustion. You know what I mean? Stefan Struve, same thing, beats him in the 3rd round. So again, I don't really attribute Volkov as being this crazy knockout artist, which is where I don't really have much qualms in terms of Alistair Overeem's side here. Another issue that I have with Overeem, though, is his kind of defensive shell that he goes into whenever guys are kind of bombing on him. He just shells up like this, puts his back up against the cage, and then just waits for his moment to pounce. And, it looks decent. Like more often than not, the shots of these fighters hit his guard and hit his elbows and his shoulders. But there's just that little hole right in the middle where, Volkov definitely has a very nice uppercut of his own, and he could definitely land one of those and possibly put Overeem out like that too. So that's a little bit of a concern there. But he does a good job in terms of right after getting out of that defensive shell of putting it back on his opponents, throwing a combination, going for a takedown, clinching up, whatever it is. He does a solid job of getting that back. So I do like Overeem here, and I think he has a solid shot of winning here. Currently around that plus 160 range. I want to see where the line goes before I jump on this spot. At plus 200, you're getting roughly a 33% implied odds on Overeem, and I think he has at least a 40 to 45% shot of winning this fight. So I'm looking to kind of like expand the value I'm getting here. I already have a couple plays, I already have a couple bets in play for this card. So I do want to see, where this Overeem line goes before I get a little bit too greedy and overzealous and trying to trace more dog money. So, I like Overeem here. I think he could kind of just slow this fight down. I like the improvements that we've been seeing from him since he changed camps and going over there to work with Team Elevation and Curtis Blades and those guys. And we're seeing it on a fight to fight basis. Like the guy goes out there, shows off his takedowns, shows off his ground and pound, shows off his ability to control these guys. And that's very huge for him. And I think Volkov is another guy that he could do that too. Volkov, sketchy takedown defense. I think UFC stats has him listed at 66% takedown defense, but he stuffed, I believe it was 11 takedowns of Curtis Blades, but Blades still went out there and ended up landing 14 of them. I like Overeem here. I think we'll see a decision victory from him here. Again, continuously taking down Volkov. Maybe not to a Curtis Blades level. Obviously, that's a little bit of a stretch given the background that Curtis Blades has in wrestling. But controlled time up against the cage, controlled time on the ground, landing some good shots, maybe some kicks here and there. Given that Volkov's leg stance is always there to kind of be hit, and then again solid work in the clinch as well too, where I think we'll see Overeem land some good knees up the middle and to the body. So I feel like there's just an exaggeration on Volkov right now due to how impressive he looked against Walt Harris. But Walt Harris, again, let's be honest, realistically is not a top 10, top 15 heavyweight. So you can't really make the comparisons in terms of how that performance will translate here against Overeem, who's a much better fighter, way more experienced, has seen guys like Volkov in the past too. You're talking about Overeem, who has, was it 50 something fights now? Let me do the quick math. He's 47 wins, 18 losses. So we're talking about 65 fights. It's going to be his 66th pro MMA fight, not to mention all the countless kickboxing and Muay Thai fights that he's had as well too. So I like Overeem. I'm going to take him to win by decision. Another veteran Overeem performance, taking Volkov down when he can, getting some good minutes up against the cage, and then after that maybe pulling away a little bit later in this fight, especially given the physique that Volkov might be coming into this fight with. So I got Overeem to win this fight via decision.